Hello, welcome to Pause for Faith. It's nice to be with you. Excuse me while I check everything is working. Great. Nice to be with you to share this time and to think about the topic. You can see the title on the video, Decisions, Commitment, Vocation, What Can Get in the Way? So I hope this discussion would help you with any big decision that you're making, medium to big. Maybe don't spend loads of time about the little decisions, but medium to large decisions, any commitment that you're about to take on, medium to large. And yes, in particular, but not only, I'm thinking about the kind of vocational, the really big decisions that people are making about life and vocation and marriage and ordination and religious life and where life is taking them. And when there's a fork in the road and there's a need to make a big decision or a big commitment, what can get in the way? Just let me give a bit of background of why this is, I think, a topic in itself. I've written a few years ago a short booklet on vocation, and it was just some different talks I'd given, thrown together and put into a booklet form. And I sent a draft round to some friends just to get some feedback and comments. I was giving lots of advice in this booklet about how to listen and pray and discern and the positive signs of going in this direction and what you could do. And generally the feedback about the writing was positive. But one person said very strongly, Stephen, you need a new chapter, a whole chapter on the difficulties that people face when they're making any big decision, and especially a vocation decision. What are the problems people have? The dead ends, the things that just get in the way and hold people back. Because very often, this person was saying, it's the things holding us back that are the real issue, rather than a lack of understanding about how to go forward. Things are holding us back, even when we know maybe we should be moving forward. And interestingly, just extra background here, I think this fits with what psychology and management theory is saying today. I remember reading something about change management, that the management of change in organizations and charities and in life, in ordinary life. I can't remember the exact language, so I might be inventing these words, but it was something like this. The article said, you've got to identify the boosters and the blockers. The boosters and the blockers, or whatever the words were. The article was saying the mistake we often make when we want things to change for ourselves as individuals or as organizations is we spend so much time and energy on the boosters, the things that will promote the change. We explain things to ourselves, to other people. We want to start things. We want to motivate other people or ourselves. But very often, the reason that things don't change, or that change is managed badly, or that change is very slower than we'd like, or that it's disastrous and it all goes pear-shaped, the reason that things don't change well is often because of the things that are blocking the change. And if we can put more energy into identifying the things that are blocking the healthy, life-giving change, then when we identify and get rid of them or move around them, then the healthy, life-giving change is released for all the positive reasons that we know about. So bringing this back to you and me, we're trying to make wise decisions, most of them small and day-to-day, but some of them medium or large. Of course, we need to focus on the positive reasons of why we might want to make this decision, make this commitment, make this change, follow this vocation. We need to focus on the positives, the things that are pulling us, but we also need to look at the things that are holding us back and to see if we need to give them a bit of attention. There are many things that can get in the way of following the right path. of making a change, of following a vocation. Or they can make it difficult to discern or make the commitments once we have discerned. I'm not going to look at all the difficulties now, and I'm not going to go very deeply into them. Sometimes it's just enough to flag something up. Maybe I'll just say a word and you'll think, yeah, I've been wrestling with that, and I just need to look at it a bit more carefully. So if there's something here that I mention that's present in your life, then maybe you can think about it, pray about it, be a bit more honest about it. These are certainly some of the common difficulties that arise as soon as someone starts to think seriously about a major change or a commitment to one vocation. I'm saying all this not to be negative, but to encourage you. And if you do feel that you're really stuck, then make sure that you look at it, pray about it, talk to someone about it. And in fact, as I've said, this live stream now, it's a series of sessions that we've been having about vocation. And when I finish the series, I'll put all the links together so you can follow them through. Okay, here's my list. See if any of these things are blocking you from moving forward or from exploring something that maybe you'd love to explore. First, worry, anxiety, lack of trust in God. We all know this. I just encourage you to try not to worry, to be at peace, to trust that God is more powerful than all your worries and of all the things that could go wrong, and that he only wants you to take one step at a time. You don't have to dive in to the deep end of the swimming pool. You can go into the shallow end. This is another talk about discernment and vocation, but we just have to think about the next step. If you're worried or anxious, speak to God about your anxieties. Put them into his loving hands. And it might be that actually your whole way of looking at God is slightly distorted. You might think that he's like an absent parent who doesn't love you, or a kind uncle who will never make any demands on you, or even a vengeful tyrant who is punishing you or out to catch you out, or he's an unpredictable boss who wants to force you into something that would not be right for you. All these crazy things that are in our subconscious. Instead, trust God. He is a tender Father who is both loving and demanding. But he cares for you more than you care for yourself. And sometimes he might challenge you and call you to something unexpected, but it will always be ultimately for your good and happiness. So don't worry. How many times does Jesus say that to us? Do not worry. Do not be afraid. Another thing that can get in the way is noise, busyness, overwork, just avoiding the question. As I say, I could be talking about your vocation. I could be talking about just some big decision that you've got to make and that's been hanging there. One way that we don't make a decision is by avoiding the decision, and it's just crowded out. We never actually get to think and pray about it because of the noise and the busyness and the work, or the very conscious avoidance of this question. Perhaps you can't hear what's right, what the way forward is. Perhaps you can't hear what God is saying to you because you never make any space to listen to God. Sorry to be blunt. If every hour of your life, every minute is full up, if your mind is constantly cluttered with work, noise, music and other distractions, then you need to make a bit of space for God and for yourself, for some thinking about the decision, about the vocation, for some praying, and at least a little bit of silence each day, just to let go of the distractions. And if the question of vocation or of a decision or a change in life that needs making, if it's there on the edges of consciousness, please don't just run away from it. It will come back whether you like it or not. And in the meantime, if you keep pushing it away, it will just make yourself more and more unhappy. And you might be tempted, another temptation, to get kind of lost in another distraction, almost subconsciously, because you want to avoid the question of vocation or change. So face the questions honestly in prayer, in time for yourself, and in conversations with someone you trust. And for a Christian, I would say, this is kind of following on from the previous point, one thing that can get in the way of us making good decisions and thinking about our vocation and discovering our vocation is not living our faith fully. I don't mean madly, but just living our faith normally, not praying, getting caught up in busyness and distractions, as I've said, or even worse, getting caught up in sin and worldliness. We will never know ourselves properly. We certainly won't know what God is inviting us to if we don't make some space for prayer each day, and if we're avoiding simply living our ordinary Catholic faith. So how can a Christian make good decisions and discover their vocation? Well, first of all, it's just by being a Christian. So if you're a Christian trying to make good decisions, trying to discover God's will, the first thing to think about is not what God's will is. Well, we're always thinking about God's will, but it's just to say, hey, let me just breathe, pause, commit to living my faith and take it a bit more seriously, and to know that it will grow. The decision, the clarity, the word of God, God's voice speaking to me, will come out of my friendship and my relationship with him, as long as I'm trying to give myself to him. And look, if you're trapped in some habitual sin, or if you're caught up in a completely worldly lifestyle, it's almost impossible to listen to your own heart, let alone to God. So just be honest with yourself. Go to confession if you can. I know it's hard in the virus world, but try and go to confession. Try to make a new start. Be honest, especially about those constant habits, even those addictive behaviors, all the common things that people struggle with: alcohol, drugs, pornography, sex outside marriage, gambling, the social media, the internet, just hours wasted on YouTube. Here are we on YouTube. Well, I hope there's some positive things here. But things that seem so harmless in themselves, work, sport, the mobile phone, the internet, Facebook, they can become like addictions that can cover up our deepest needs and cut us off from our true selves. So just be a little bit honest. The big addictions, capital A, the big sins, capital S, or just the ordinary human patterns and addictions that we can get trapped in. Be honest about them and long to be a bit more free. This is the point. When we are more free, more in touch with ourselves, with the Lord, with our friends around us, with people that we know and love and trust, then we can listen to our own hearts and listen to God better. Something else that can hold us back from a new path, a vocation, a relationship, any number of things, is fear of commitment. Fear of commitment. Now look, we rightly value freedom, but in the Western world, certainly, that I'm familiar with, we often confuse freedom with being able to choose from an endless variety of options, as if losing options is a loss of freedom. Do you see the sort of false logic here? A commitment to anything, let alone a lifelong commitment, it can seem like a limitation, even a loss of oneself. But in fact, this is, I think, true logic. If you have a series of endless options, actually, that's to have no options. If you're constantly leaving your options open, if you're constantly deferring, avoiding, getting stuck into something and making commitment to something, in effect, you have no options because you're ruling everything out eternally. You're constantly putting things off because you never embrace anything with your whole heart. Freedom isn't to have an infinite series of options. Freedom is being able freely to give your heart, your life, your mind, your time, your love, to give yourself to something important to you, meaningful. It might be short, medium, long term. It might be a lifelong commitment, but that's freedom. And so to commit to something for life, to a person, to a marriage, to a family, to a religious vocation, to the priesthood, to a task worthy of such a big commitment, to commit to something for life is not to lose freedom. It's to constantly be in touch with that decision to give yourself to what you value freely. Commitment isn't opposed to freedom. And look, if you're young and single and afraid of commitment, and this is the culture we live in, let me say to you very bluntly, God may be inviting you to make a lifelong commitment, to put down roots so that you can truly flourish, to build one concrete life rather than to fantasize about innumerable possible lives. One concrete life is better than 1,000 fantasy lives. He might be inviting you to take responsibility for your own life. It is sometimes better to do one thing with your unreserved commitment than to drift through life without any firm sense of purpose. Just some truisms, I think, about freedom and commitment and how they're not opposed, just in case you thought they were. So just be honest about your fear of commitment. I don't mean the next day you should propose to someone or join a seminary, but just to be honest and to think it through and pray it through. The next thing, it's not an ordered list, this, but another thing that can get in the way of making a big choice or following a vocation is fear of your own inadequacy. Fear of your own inadequacy. Perhaps you fear that you're not ready for this task, for this decision. You're not the right person for this vocation, even though you feel attracted to it. You worry, let's say, just that you're really interested in something or someone, this person you love from a distance, or a vocation to the priesthood or the religious life. You really admire and have fallen in love with this, but you're thinking that you are not holy enough, you're not intelligent enough, you're not qualified enough, you're not loving enough, you're too shy, or you're too sociable, you're too this or too that, or too inadequate, or whatever the too is. Maybe you're right. Maybe you're right. But perhaps you're underestimating yourself or underestimating God. Maybe you're right, but perhaps, quite possibly, you're underestimating yourself or you're underestimating God. This is a God who chooses the weak and makes them strong. And sometimes he invites us to do what seems impossible. And only later on, he gives us the strength to do it. Why not take a step anyway? Test the water and let God decide further down the line if it's really for you or not. In other words, you might, if you really want to do this, there might be 100 potential reasons not to do it. But maybe you need to experiment, to take a step, to take a risk, and to see if those reasons are real or not. And if they are, if you really do meet not just a hurdle, but a closed door, locked, padlocked, and you've prayed and you can't find a way through the door, okay, at least you've tried. But don't turn back because of an imaginary door. I say this in faith, right? Because we believe in a God who can empower the powerless and who can clothe with his gifts, his righteousness, the weak, sinful human person who is trying to do his will. And yes, most of us are not ready for marriage, for religious life, the monastery, the priesthood, but with prayer and time and the support of friends and family in the church, God will help us to grow into that. That's why we have engagement. That's why we have marriage prep. That's why we have seminaries and novitiates. Trust the church, trust the people around you. If it's right for you, they'll help you, or they'll help you to realize that it's not for you. But don't disqualify yourself before you've even started if it's right for you. And connected with this is a fear of failure. A fear of failure. But let me say, if this is the right step for you, if it's the right decision, might be huge. It might just be changing career, choosing a university. Look, if this is the right step for you, then God will help you. If he wants you to flourish and find happiness here, then you will. And if he's leading you somewhere else, and it seems like you've failed, as in you've taken a decision, it hasn't worked out, and you've had to change tack, then trust that the Lord is using all these decisions and these processes. God writes straight with crooked lines. What matters is not success or failure, but whether you've tried to be faithful at each moment. As long as you try, do your best, he'll sort it out. Another struggle we can have, we can think this is the right way forward, but basically we don't want to let go of what we've got. There can be an attachment to the lifestyle we have, to a personal ambition or career path that we've imagined for ourselves. Here are you've got this very tidy life planned, and now God is nagging you in your prayer or your conscience to think about something else. He's calling you to a vocation, or he's just trying to surprise you and shake you up a little bit, and you don't want it because you think you know what life is all about. Well, maybe it's not right for you and you have discovered already. Okay, well, just do some thinking and praying. But let's just admit that any lifelong commitment, anything worthwhile, will involve some sacrifice and cost, giving up something you're attached to, a lifestyle, habit, an income. Letting go of what could have been, back to that question of freedom. If you choose anything, you've got to let go of all the other things you haven't chosen. If you choose one dream, you've got to let go of the other dreams for the moment. One ambition excludes other ambitions for the moment. Sometimes we have to make a step and a choice. Please trust that if this is really for you, if, for example, this is your vocation, it will be a treasure that will be worth any sacrifice. Really, if this is important, wouldn't you want to give up everything for it? And God will, quote, reimburse you in other unexpected ways. This is what Jesus says about following him. We will have to sacrifice some things, but he will pay us back in different ways. And remember that our minds usually exaggerate the difficulties and the sacrifices. They're real. If you become a nun, if you become a priest, if you get married, there are real sacrifices. We need to acknowledge them, but not exaggerate them, and to know that God will help us if it's right for us. Another thing that can get in the way of a choice, making a choice, a decision, committing to a lifelong vocation, is a desire for certainty. A desire for certainty. It's unlikely that you will ever be 100% certain about any significant choice at the beginning. at the beginning. Of course, you will have doubts and questions. At this moment, I'm not saying at the end, on the day of your wedding, you've got to be pretty sure you want to marry this person. Or when you lie down on the floor in prostration for your ordination, you need to be pretty sure, okay? But all of the steps before then, will I date this person? Even will I get engaged? Will I speak to a vocations director? Even will I go to seminary for the first year or for the second year? For me, for the third year, for the fourth year, you need to be sure enough that this is a reasonable step to take. You don't need to be certain. You need to be certain at the end, but not at the beginning and not in the middle. So you need to be sure enough to take the next step and then to trust God that he will reveal whether you should take the next step. Yes, it's a risk, but it's a calculated risk. It's a rational risk, but also it's a risk not to take a choice. Because if you put a decision off, that's a risk as well. It's making a decision. It's making a decision to stay where you are rather than to change. You can't avoid risks. Life is full of risks. God is always with us, guiding and supporting us. We're making this decision in good faith. Remember, it's not reckless. That's another topic. I think there's another video about this, yes, how to make good decisions. We're weighing up the pros and cons. We're listening to our heart. We're talking to people we trust. But then we need to be sure enough to take the next step and then to trust the Lord and to keep listening and praying and talking and to know that if we've got reason to take the following step, that's great, or a reason to turn back or go sideways, that's great. This is connected with another issue, which is the desire for perfection. The desire for perfection. Perhaps you want to be a religious brother or sister, but you can't find an order that is good enough for you. You want to be a diocesan priest, but the bishop of your diocese doesn't seem to be the right person for you. You want to get married, but no one matches up to your high standards or to the romantic comedies that you've been reading and listening and watching in the cinema. Do you see the danger? Of course, we're looking for what's right for us, but that's different from looking for perfection. You will never find the perfect religious order, the perfect diocese, the perfect bishop, the perfect spouse. You won't. You don't need a priest to tell you this. Every dating book will talk about this. You'll read about the 80-20 rule when you read any dating books. Yes, they all tell you, look for the 80%. There are some red lines. Okay, it's not to accept craziness, but just be open. If someone doesn't match your idea of the perfect spouse, at least be open. If they've got 80% of what you're looking for, that's quite a lot. At least be open to friendship and see where it takes you. This isn't about settling for second best, but it's about not letting an artificial desire for perfection get in the way of the real person, the real vocation, the real religious order that is there in front of me and that might be right for me. Okay, I've mentioned the 80% rule. It's not infallible, but just it keeps us open. Be open to the choices around you. Be open to the opportunities. If you don't tick 100%, that's not a reason to rule it out. If it's only 17%, walk away. Yeah, but if it's getting into 70, 80%, then think, wow, this is looking really hopeful. Let me explore it and let me see if the 20% that isn't working, the things that seem to be wrong, are they real deal breakers? And sometimes they are. Yeah, something just isn't right with this person or with our relationship. Something isn't right for me with this religious order or with my diocese. Yeah, just so They might be deal breakers, but they might be something that, in fact, we've got to live with, because it's about life and reality and living with imperfection and learning to love the people that we're with. Religious community is a classic example of that. Yeah, don't join a religious community because you think everyone's going to be a saint in it. They'll be trying to be saints, hopefully, but they won't all be saints necessarily. Okay, another heading here, something else that can get in the way, is opposition from people you love. Opposition from people you love. Now, don't recklessly do something just to annoy your mum or dad or whatever. Your family or friends might be against you taking this step. This is not uncommon, especially if you're thinking about an unexpected vocation that didn't fit into their tidy plans about what their children or their sibling or their friend was going to do. Now, listen to them. They might have some insight that you don't. I was about to do something in my past that I thought was completely right for me, and I had two people tell me that I trust that it wasn't the right thing, and it made me completely rethink it. And I thought, after a little bit of time and prayer and reflection, in fact, they're right. And thank God they spoke to me and I listened to them. I can tell you more about this another time. So sometimes, always we need to listen, but sometimes we do need to be strong and do what we believe is right, even in the face of opposition or misunderstanding. This needs discernment. But just because someone you love and care for disagrees with you, all I'm saying is that's not a reason to exclude it or to assume that you shouldn't follow that path. We need to weigh everything up, listen to them sensitively, but also listen to all the other reasons. And the opposition might come not from a friend or a parent or a mentor. It might come from the culture and the society more widely. Sometimes we are doing something that is countercultural. Christian marriage is countercultural. Religious life and priesthood is countercultural. So in one sense, of course, we may face some opposition. Yeah. Again, we're not just headstrong and reckless in delighting in opposing the culture or the people around us, but we must be prepared for a little bit of opposition if we're going to do something truly worthwhile. Okay. Look, there's a few more things I could add in, but I think that's the main areas that I want to mention now. We can get stuck. Yeah, we're thinking about change, about life, about vocation, about a big practical decision, about career, about relationships. These things come up. We can see lots of positive reasons for doing something, but sometimes we just can't make a decision and we're stuck. And I've given you these topics here just almost as a checklist. Just run through them. Listen to this talk again if it's helpful. I'll try and put some notes into the video description, just some headings, and just think, is this real? Is this holding me back? And if it is, then it needs a little bit of thought and prayer to see if it is a real reason to not move forward, or if in fact it's a bit of a decoy, or it's a chain that needs cutting, or it's an illusion that's loomed large in front of you and actually needs blowing away or stepping around so that you can get to the really important things, which are, is this right for you? Yes or no? If it's right, then have the courage to follow it, or at least to take the next step. And if it's not, then be at peace and see where else God is leading you. Okay, thanks for being with me now. Really good to be with you. This is a series in vocational discernment and how to make decisions, and I will put some links onto the video description here for some of the other sections in this series, so I hope they're helpful as well. And do subscribe to the Pause for Faith YouTube channel if you want to follow up, and you'll get some notifications then about forthcoming streams that we're doing. Really nice to be with you. God bless.